Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this Sunday night, July 12, 2015 edition of Nightcast. For our opening story tonight, friends, we go over to China, where a Typhoon Chan-hom leaves thousands stranded.
They're used to stormy weather in this part of Southeast Asia, but rarely as devastating as this. The speed of Typhoon Chan-hom has taken everyone by surprise, with rescue teams racing to deal with emergencies after a riverbank was breached in Shaoxing City, flooding villages, power facilities, residential homes and farmland. With families trapped or stranded, the priority is to deliver essential supplies and as quickly as possible. Although no casualties have been reported, more than 700,000 people and 81,000 hectares of farmland were affected. The typhoon claimed several lives in the Philippines within the past few days, and casualties have been reported in Japan. The authorities say the typhoon will be downgraded to a tropical storm when it's expected to reach North Korea on Monday morning. Russell Trott, BBC News.
Okay, friends, and up to something like 1 million people, more than 1 million people, have been forced to move away from their homes after this typhoon in China made landfall in the Zhejiang province. Domestic flights have been canceled in South Korea as high winds and heavy rainfall move across the region there. And we thank Russell Trott for his report and video. And if you caught it, friends, at the beginning of that, he's talking about one of the worst ever. So we've got a situation in the news as we open tonight with things accelerating like they've never been before, or the way the reporters are saying things. And if we take a look just real quickly at our chart, just one second. Let's see. Am I going to do this correctly? Yeah, that's going to work. So I've got to switch banks. And I gotta get this set up where it's easier for me to do this while we are on the air live. But I think I got it. Okay, now we can go to the chart. On this chart, you see there are 5 seals showing. Now, there's a total of 7 seals mentioned in the book of Revelation. Our focus is often on the first 5 because the 5th one is the next major event to happen in prophecy, which happens after these first 4 that have actually been active since, in one way or another, since even Jesus Christ's time. But Christ told us as we see them get extremely active, then know that the kingdom of God is nigh, and before the kingdom of God can come, the 5th, 6th, and 7th seals have to play out. So we know the 5th seal is going to occur when we see these first 4 seals becoming very, very, very active, as they are. And the 4th seal, the pale horse, Jesus Christ described in plain language. Well, let's just, while I've got it up here, even though we're at the beginning of the show tonight, I usually try to save this till later. Let's quickly go through these. We've got the first seal depicted in the book of Revelation as a white horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language as religious deception, saying that many would come in my name, in the name of Jesus, saying that Jesus was indeed and in fact the Christ, and yet they would deceive many. We have the second seal, the second column over there, depicted in the book of Revelation as a red horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language as war and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. We have the third column, the black column there with the little black horse at the top. That third seal is depicted in the book of Revelation as a black horse with scarcity of food. And Jesus Christ described it in a word, limus, meaning famine. And then we have the 4th seal that I was going to mention and that I want to draw focus on because of that first story tonight, which is depicted in the book of Revelation as a pale horse with a rider whose name is Death, and alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave. And Jesus Christ described this horse in three different terms. Primarily, though, he mentioned it would be loimas, disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. But he also said that between the third seal and the fifth seal, there would be Tarricade. It would be just trouble, general trouble, roiling waters, mobs, seditions, figuratively and literally roiling waters. And he said there would be seismas, seismic activity, commotions in the air, such as gale force winds of all kinds, including this Typhoon Chan-hom, which was in our first story tonight, and commotions on the ground, such as earthquakes and tsunamis, wildfires, volcanic eruptions, anything that makes a big seismic activity and commotion on the ground. So this story we just had in this opening news report tonight, friends, the reporter was saying it's one of the worst ever. And so that should be a flag, a red flag waving for a lot of us who are watching prophecy that, hey, we better be on the ball with this stuff, because worst ever type things happening are signals that it's getting close to coming. And Christ ain't going to play around about it, and the Father aren't going to play around about it much anymore. They've had a big delay, and they are ready for His kingdom to be ushered on in, and things are underway to cause that to happen. And for that to happen, the EU needs to come together in three different ways that Mr. Herbert Armstrong explained to us, saying that they'll need to have an economic union and a single currency. They'll need to have a political union. Well, he said they'd need an economic union. And really, we put that together. The only way for that to really happen is for it to be a single currency. And they've been working on this euro for a long time and trying to settle that out, and the impact that's had after Greece exchanged its national currency for the euro, and then their GDP way out of line, and they got a lot of bailouts that apparently many are saying they didn't properly consider or discipline themselves in handling. And so now we've got that big problem. And the rest of our news tonight, and almost for the last many weeks, we have a section of news that becomes, we changed the program to the Greek crisis, and that's all it'll be for the next 10, 12 minutes. And there's a lot on that tonight, and we're going to go there. But those three elements that Mr. Armstrong mentioned that were needed for a European Union, a United States of Europe, to come together in a way that will have 10 heads who, in frustration over some event or events, will give their power to one dictator, one dictate, one emperor, whom the Pope will crown in a coronation ceremony, as it's been done in the past historically in Frankfurt, Germany, up on the second floor of the Romer building, where the quarters of the Kaisersaal is located, the Emperor's Hall, where they crown emperors and kings, and where now you can visit this hall, Emperor's Hall, Kaisersaal in Frankfurt, Germany, and you can see statues and portraits of past kings and emperors who have been crowned there, many with the blessing of the Pope. And but we'll cover that in more detail at another time. Let's get into our Greek crisis section now. I said I was going through. Let me mention the third one. There would need to be an economic union, a political union, and that's coming together with this EU. It'll shape down to somehow they'll have 10 regions or countries that have their leaders give their power to one. All right, so there's your political union. And the third thing Mr. Armstrong said would be needed for that EU to come together in the way that will form into electing a beast power, an emperor, a dictate over it, would be to have a military union, which they might bring together fast. And Germany has been allowed to create weaponry and sell it and keep some of it as their own, and have a military, which after World War II, Japan was, for a long time, not allowed to have. For a long time, Germany was not allowed to have a military. But now they can, and they participate in places around the world. And the United States, the UK, Russia even, maybe not so willingly, but Russia's had its problems with the USSR folding. Are kind of just batting an eye or winking or looking the other way as Germany builds up a military. Old Germany that made at least a couple of worldwide attempts to take over and rule the world. And now his people are forgetting history and allowing Germany to become the big dog over in Europe, which Greece is highly indebted to. And our first story on that, let's go to our first story on that tonight, friends. It's entitled Greece Awaits Eurozone Bailout Decision. We got 3 or 4 or 5 important stories on Greece tonight. Here's the first of them.
Near the old Olympic Stadium in Athens, Greeks while away time, a nation in waiting, while their fate, their future, is settled elsewhere.
With the discussions I have with my friends and relatives, I know that they can't sleep at night. I mean, it's been more than 2 weeks that people don't sleep at night.
Sitting at a window, Lucas Constantinou, aged 84, a ceramic artist fearing the unknown outside the euro. This has been humiliating, he says. I've never seen anything like it. There is no future. The immediate concern here is how to relieve pressure on the banks. They're known to have very low reserves, and without a deal, some could fail in the days ahead. We've been told that the banks won't reopen tomorrow, and almost certainly not by the end of the week. And some kind of capital controls will remain in place for several months. A senior government official told me that in any event, the banks will need recapitalizing with 10 billion euros. During these negotiations, the economy has been in free fall. 60 businesses are said to be closing each day, with 600 jobs lost. Greeks can only watch as their eurozone partners question whether they can be trusted. Konstantinos Tsoukalas, a government MP, finds the process demeaning.
I most definitely feel that mistrust is a false argument. You cannot mistrust a country.
The Prime Minister, Alexis Tsipras, is widely expected to reshuffle his cabinet in the coming days, discarding ministers who opposed further cuts. Just a week ago, Greeks voted no to further austerity. Now is a moment of concessions, hoping to secure a third bailout and remain in the euro. Gavin Hewitt, BBC News, Athens.
Okay, thank you very much, Gavin Hewitt, who was reporting, as you heard, from Athens with people there while we wait to see what happens. A full summit of all EU members has been canceled while Eurozone talks on the Greece bailout continues. Speaking before the cancellation was announced, Finnish Finance Minister Alexander Stubb gave an interview with the BBC.
We're all constructively trying to find a solution in a very difficult situation. What we are saying is that the conditionality that has been presented by the Greeks is simply not enough at this stage. We need to have clear commitments, clear conditionality, and clear proof that those conditions will be implemented at the end of the day. That's pretty much where we stand.
What proof are you looking for? How can they prove it other than to say
Well, there are basically 3 litmus tests here. Number 1 is the stability of the eurozone and Greek finances. Number 2 is debt sustainability, and then number 3 is basic financing. If we get those right and we link those to very tough conditionality, which has to do with pensions, which has to do with VATs, which has to do with structural reforms, etc., then we might find a deal. So I'm still hopeful, but I think we're very far away from the type of conditionality that we need.
Is this going to go all the way to the summit, to the full council this afternoon?
Well, it's hard to say. I think we have an extremely good president of the Eurogroup, Jeroen Dijsselbloem, and he's been conducting the negotiations very well. But as I said, you know, if this was a negotiation from 1 to 10, I think we're still standing somewhere between 3 and 4. So making progress, but not there yet. Thanks a lot.
All right, friends, and a further video on that after today's meeting with Prime Minister Tsipras, with the German Chancellor, with the French President, with the others there. It is feared Greece could crash out of the euro. Katja Adler has this very interesting report.
An emergency eurozone summit with Greece the focus of attention. And a warning. Today, it said, is the deadline for Greece staying in the eurozone. You've heard it before. You've heard this before too. Another upbeat message from the Greek Prime Minister, despite gloomy mood music.
We can reach an agreement tonight if all parties want it.
Guten Tag.
But do they?
The
situation is extremely difficult. There will be tough talks, and there won't be unity at any price.
So why are eurozone leaders continuing on this merry-go-round? Why don't they just slash Greece's debt or push it out? The answer? Because they're unsure what to do for the best, not just for Greece, but in their own interest. Remember, the eurozone is only just clawing its way out of its 2008 financial crisis. From France to Italy to Germany, politics and economics are being affected by Greece. And so is unity in the wider EU. Greece says it needs at least 50 billion euros and a restructuring of its debts to get its finances in order. Big powers France and Germany are at odds over whether Greece can be trusted to honour any new agreement. Trust in the Greek government is at an all-time low.
The main obstacles to moving forward is lack of trust. So I would like to see the Greek government to take concrete actions starting tomorrow in Parliament to implement measures that are needed for Greece in the first place.
The stakes are enormously high. Greece's banks say they're about to run out of money. The aim tonight is to come up with a compromise, if not a final deal.
And friends, do understand this. The summit of all European Union members planned for today has been canceled as finance ministers try to hammer out a deal to secure a third bailout for Greece. The BBC's Johnny Diamond said agreement was still a long way off due to the, quote, you'll hear him here, open expressions of distrust between some eurozone members and Greece.
This day was supposed to end with a grand meeting of heads of state and government of the whole of the European Union. That's 28 leaders were supposed to come here, nominally to discuss the wider situation and the possible impact of Greece leaving the euro. And instead, the president of the council, Donald Tusk, has said there's no point having that meeting. What they need to have is a continuing meeting of the leaders of the Euro group. That is the Eurozone, the 19 leaders of the countries that are members of the Euro. And to me, the reasoning is pretty clear. Instead of discussing what might happen if Greece falls out of the Euro, Donald Tusk and a number of other leaders here want to focus on getting a deal to keep Greece in the Euro. Now, that deal is still, I have to say, a fair way off, because there are such open expressions of distrust between some of the Eurozone leaders and Greece. And also, it has to be said, although the Greek proposals that have been made are the kinds of things which Eurozone leaders wanted a couple of weeks ago, that's privatizations, tax rises, pension cuts, reform of the Greek labour market, although those proposals are what they wanted, the price tag is staggering. Probably around 70 billion euro in bailout alone, and a restructuring of Greek debts such that they may never be repaid, or if it will be, it'll be your and my children who see those repayments. And a fair number of governments are simply saying it is too much. We don't trust the Greek government to live up to its commitments. So there is an enormous gap to be bridged. And Donald Tusk has clearly made the decision that they need to have basically one focus today, bridging that gap and getting some kind of deal by the end of the day.
All right, talk about trying to pull a deal together, friends. News regarding the talks to strike a provisional agreement on Iran's nuclear program are, according to today's news, in the final phase, the French foreign minister believes. Laurent Fabius was among a number of negotiators at the Vienna talks expressing hopes for a historic deal. The agreement would impose limits on Iran's nuclear program in return for relief from economic sanctions. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said talks would not be extended beyond tomorrow, Monday, but there was still work to do. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry also warned that major issues remained, but said he was hopeful. Mr. Fabius, who canceled a trip to Africa to stay at the talks, said, "I hope we are finally entering the final phase of these marathon negotiations. I believe it," end quote. A government source said it was still, from Germany, a German government source said it was still possible for the negotiations to fail, but a deal could be reached quickly if Tehran was ready to take the final steps, end quote. Another quote, "Negotiations are currently in the absolute final phase and are running intensely through the night," the German source quoted Reuters, quoted by Reuters, said. So, there should be more news on that tomorrow, in tomorrow's news, friends. Our last story for tonight, we go to a story that relates to, let's bring this chart back up. We brought it up at the beginning of the program. Let's bring it up, Larry, quickly at the end of the program. The first seal, Book of Revelation, refers to, depicts as a white horse, which, as I explained earlier, Jesus Christ defined that in plain language as religious deception, false Christ, false religions, saying that many would come in my name, saying that I, Jesus, am Christ, and yet they would deceive many. Now, I know I said that at the beginning of the program. I do think we need to keep that well in mind. In our last story tonight, friends, hundreds of thousands of people have visited the most important pilgrimage site in Paraguay, to see the Pope at the end of the South American tour. During Mass at the shrine of Cacupe, C-A-A-C-U-P-E, about 30 miles, 50 kilometers from the capital, Pope Francis said a special tribute to the women of Paraguay for rebuilding the country. Most of Paraguay's male population died in a devastating war against Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. You know what? I was reading you this because I didn't think we had video, but we do. I'm getting a flag here saying this is video. Okay, that devastating war I was mentioning to you between Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay occurred between 1865 and 1870. We've got this video report with Elaine Jung.
The rock star reception Pope Francis has become all too familiar with. The large, deafening crowds, the tears of joy, and of course the selfies. Thousands camped overnight hoping to catch a glimpse of the pontiff.
Like all my friends, we are very moved. The Pope passed by very fast, but the truth is that we have been waiting and sleeping here all these days for his blessing. It is a great joy.
After Ecuador and Bolivia, Paraguay marks the last stop of his South America tour. A tour that began with an apology for the crimes of the Catholic Church against indigenous people across the continent, and ending here at the Shrine of the Virgin of Capucay, Paraguay's most sacred pilgrimage site. He dedicated his homily to the women who helped rebuild the country from the ravages of war, battles which killed most of the country's men in the 1860s. At the next venue, the Pope of the Poor had this message for world leaders.
Corruption is the plague, it's the gangrene of society. For example, no politician can do his job if he's being bribed by people who are corrupt. Give me this power, give me that, or I'll do this to you. This happens in all places in the world because that's how it is. If a country really wants to preserve its dignity, it must yank it out.
In the week-long tour, the pontiff skipped his native Argentina, not wanting to get involved in the country's upcoming election. But he does have plans to go back home next year, in what will be his first visit as Pope. Elaine Young, BBC News.
All right, friends, and there's a story we'll be watching. I'll be trying to get video on for tomorrow night. I've got a report here that there's a big tower fire in Ireland, and I'm going to see if we can find a video report on that to bring you tomorrow night to see if we can't explain what happened and why. But that's it for this Sunday night report. Thanks for joining me here on Nightcast. God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Monday night, friends, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.